When I suggest that better sex education where you include consent training might prevent rape, a common objection I get is, but everybody knows that rape is wrong. Rapists know that what they're doing is wrong. They just don't care. Yeah, everybody says that rape is bad. Even rapists think that rape is bad. There was a study done where nearly 1,900 college students were asked 4 questions to determine if they had ever raped someone or attempted to rape someone. But the study never used the word rape, and 120 men, meaning 6%, answered yes. A similar study, which surveyed 86 male college students, found similar results. It turns out that as long as the word rape isn't used, rapists will self-report, because the word rape is taboo, and most typically, rapists do not view what they did as rape. So saying that everyone knows it's bad to rape, I'm a good guy, I never raped someone, isn't just completely worthless to a constructive conversation about rape, it's also deeply ironic. Because that is exactly what a rapist would say. And you reasoning the same way as a rapist isn't a convincing counter-argument. Now, despite the fact that their actions meet the legal definition of rape, the men surveyed never got caught, assumingly because their crimes fall under the label acquaintance rape, which makes victims less likely to report and prosecutors less likely to prosecute. For a variety of reasons, but it's mostly rooted in the faulty and stereotypical view that society has of rape. The general image is that it needs to be violent and happen outside in a dark park or an alley by a filthy psycho stranger holding a weapon. These kind of incidents do happen. They're called assault rapes, and they're much more likely to make the news. The more horrible and gruesome the assault is, the more it's going to sell, but the effect of this is a distorted view of sexual assault in the public's eye. By focusing on the most sensationalist rape cases, the media has managed to take the extreme minority and wrongfully portrayed it as the norm, when the reality is that the majority of women know their attackers, and the assaults often happen in places where women feel comfortable. As a result, there is a widespread belief that rapists typically attack strangers, use weapons, and inflict extensive physical injuries. So when a rape occurs where the rapist doesn't fit the stereotype, many people find it hard to view the rape as real rape. Even the victim might not understand that they were raped at first. They might feel like shit and think that what happened was wrong somehow, but still not something you can report to the police. The result of this stereotype is that physical injuries and the use of a weapon are 2 factors increasing the chance for trial. Those factors weren't present with the rapists interviewed in this study. Also, it's not very easy to report someone that you know as a figure in your day-to-day life, especially if it's a respected member of the community. And acquaintance rape victims tend to blame themselves more, especially if alcohol was involved. But you know what's really interesting? This stereotypical view of rape that the media and society perpetuate even affects the rapists themselves. The study I mentioned earlier was an American one, but the information corresponds that which I've seen from Swedish reports. A crime journalist wrote a book consisting of interviews with sentenced rapists, and it turns out that even rapists think the same way about rapists as normal people. They have the exact same prejudice. One rapist interviewed said that when he arrived at the treatment facility, he expected all the other rapists to be the kind of extreme psychos who jump out of the woods with a large knife. Instead, they were just normal guys. Nobody had used a knife. And despite the fact that he was sentenced, he refused to view himself as a rapist, saying, "Why should I be branded as a rapist just because I misinterpreted someone saying no when I was drunk?" This is another typical prejudice about rape. The idea that it can only be rape if evil intentions are involved. Rape doesn't have to be conscious. Rape is something that happens when you lose consideration. Another rapist interviewed said that if someone had told me a year prior that I would at some point rape a 5-year-old girl, I would have never believed it. I would never do something like that. Or so I thought. I mean, rapists are the worst people there are. That's worse than murder. Another rapist said, first she agreed to it, but then she said no. I don't remember a lot. I was drunk. Those are reoccurring factors throughout the book. Alcohol is involved. Girl agrees to sex at first, but later changes her mind. Guy ignores her change in consent and keeps going. Likes to shift the blame by saying that she wasn't clear enough. As if she needs to start a violent fight for him to get the point. There's usually not a whole lot of shouting, fighting, scratching, and running in fear for your life. Most rapes don't look like Mortal Kombat. In fact, the most common reaction is shock and having no idea what to do because you completely freeze up and become unable to move or speak. The crime journalist also interviewed the people who work with rehabilitating rapists, and they all say the same things. That they're shocked by how normal the perpetrators appear to be, and that when they arrive to the facility, the perpetrators all have an intense hatred towards rapers. It's only first after treatment that they can acknowledge what they've done, and at that point they start hating themselves and even need to be kept under surveillance because suicide attempts are common. Another common objection I see is that only psychopaths and mentally disturbed people rape, so consent training wouldn't make a difference. Well, yeah, I mean, that might be true about assault rapes, but those are a minority of all rape cases, about 10 to 20%. Most rapes are committed by someone the person knows and happen indoor. And rapists aren't necessarily psychopaths. You look at various studies done on incarcerated rapists, and the number of psychopathic offenders vary from approximately 5% to 60% depending on the type of offender. Also, the mere fact that the term non-psychopathic offender is used in rape research and statistics should tell you something. One study also concluded that rapists actually have more empathy towards women in general than non-sexual offenders, and the same degree of empathy as non-sexual offenders towards rape victims at the hands of other men. The study concluded that rapists may suppress empathy primarily towards their own victim, rather than suffer from a generalized empathy deficit. Now, Sweden is one of the most progressive, feminist countries on earth. So what do average, everyday Swedish youths have to say about rape and its victims?
När jag har förstått det rätt så vill du berätta någonting för mig som du har berättat förut.
Ett erkännande.
Ett erkännande. Vad erkänner du för någonting då?
Jag satte mig på hennes armar.
Varför gjorde du så?
Nej, jag vet inte. För att hon inte skulle gå därifrån helt enkelt.
I det tredje förhöret med polisen erkänner Oskar våldtäkten. Han erkänner att Linnea bad honom sluta 5 eller 6 gånger, men att han ändå satte sig på hennes armar för att hon inte skulle kunna komma loss och att han bände upp hennes käke för att tvinga henne till oralsex.
Om jag använder dina egna ord så sa du att du sköt satsen i ansiktet på henne. Om du berättar därifrån vad ni sa mellan varandra.
Efter det?
Ja, och vad som hände.
Hon ställde sig upp och så torkade av sig och sa förlåt sådär. Så det ska aldrig hända igen och så hon bara luntade sig och så sa hon att jag skulle stänga dörren efter hon har gått ut så här så ingen visste att jag var det.
Varför sa du förlåt?
För att jag mådde så jävla dåligt över det jag hade gjort.
2 veckor senare ändrar Oskar sin version. Nu säger han att Linnea var med på allt som hände på toaletten. Men i både tingsrätten och senare hovrätten döms Oskar för våldtäkt mot barn eftersom Linnea bara är 14 år. Det är tydliga och enhälliga domar. Linneas trovärdiga berättelse, Oskars detaljerade erkännande, rättsintyg och vittnesuppgifter talar alla sitt tydliga språk. Linnea tror nu att mardrömmen äntligen är över. Men den har bara börjat. Gärningsmannen döms, men nästan ingen tror henne. På nätet kallas hon hora och luder och smutskastas med lögner. Hennes egna vänner vänder sig mot henne och på skolan strejkar man för att stötta våldtäktsmannen. Alla vi träffar beskriver Oskar som en social kille som inte har några problem att få tjejer. Ingen förstår varför han skulle begå en våldtäkt på en skoltoalett.
Han är en riktigt schysst kille.
Ja, det är han.
Det är som... Skulle jag se på honom, jag skulle aldrig tro att han skulle göra något sånt där. För han är ju...
Han är rolig.
Han bryr sig om andra. Han är hur schysst som helst.
Ja, det gör han. Helt random personer kan han komma och liksom kolla hur det är. Liksom. Han är omtänksam.
Jag tycker allting låter så luddigt runt omkring alltihopa så att bara det att en kille kan förfå en tjej och tvinga en och suga av en om man säger så. Det kan ju liksom inte fungera, det måste ju vara bara att bita ifrån det. Tycker man som vuxen, eller jag vet inte.
Och där så börjar han ta på mig på ett sätt som jag inte är bekväm med. Och jag säger ifrån, säger att det här är ingen bra idé, ta bort hans händer. Och jag får göra det här 3 gånger för han är återigen där. Och efter 3:e gången så säger han, men jag vet att du vill. Och då var det som att någonting ändrades i hans blick. Det var som att han blev en helt annan människa, han blev elak. Det var ett mörker som kom över honom och jag blev fruktansvärt rädd. Jag kände att det finns ingenting som jag kommer kunna göra för att komma härifrån om inte han får det som han vill. Så jag drabbades av det här som många våldtäktsoffer drabbas av, frozen fear. Jag blev helt förstelnad och försvann. Sen kommer jag bara ihåg att han vände mig om. Att det gjorde ont och att jag önskade att jag var någon annanstans. 2,5 månader efter jag anmälde var han på sitt första förhör. Det räckte att han sa att jag ville, så la man ner förundersökningen eftersom det inte fanns några tekniska bevis som styrkte det här. Liksom.
Herregud, vad tänkte du då?
Jag tänkte väl som många andra gör att okej, då ljög jag. Eller jag måste hittat på det här. För att jag fick ju också många reaktioner av kompisar som var ungefär att men du borde ju ändå vara tacksam för att han var snygg. Så att det kanske ändå inte var en våldtäkt. För att våldtäkt är ju någon som är äcklig. Det är i en park. Och han var ändå snygg så du ska vara tacksam. Men det var även kompisar som sa men en sån som du blir inte våldtagen. Och med alla de här kommentarerna plus att man la ner förundersökningen. Det enda jag kunde tänka var ju att nej, men då var det ingen våldtäkt. Då hade jag fel. Medvetenheten inte alls är så stor om vad våldtäkt egentligen är.
Ja, hur går resonemangen då?
Många tror ju att den enda sanna våldtäkten är äckliga gubben i parken. Och den här bilden är extremt utbredd även bland ungdomar. Det märker vi när vi är ute i skolor. Och många tror inte att det kan hända på hemmafesten under helgen. Många tror inte att det kan hända av pojkvännen eller flickvännen. Och det är jätteproblematiskt.
How is this amount of widespread ignorance not a problem? Obviously, there needs to be better sex education for all schools, not just some. The problem with sex education is that it often only deals with the biological aspects of sex, not the psychological and social ones. Talking about pregnancy and contraception is great, but don't stop there. Go on to cover the importance of boundaries, the unrealistic expectations that porn creates, how consent works, the different phases of sexual assault. Teach students that nobody else is allowed to define your needs and what makes you feel unsafe. That's what people need to talk more about. What healthy sexual relations look like. And even if it might not reach through to those in the risk zone of becoming a perpetrator, it would at least educate the general public on how it all works. So that we can create a society that's more supporting of the victim, instead of hounding the shit out of them because their experiences don't suit your ignorant prejudice about sexual assault. The reason I think there's something to consent education is that they tried it in Kenya and it gave results. Acquaintance rape dropped by 20%, and the amount of boys thinking that miniskirts were inviting them to have sex dropped by 50%. Now, Kenya is a backwards fucking country. If you can take a country that's that backwards and get them to stop raping after just a few classes, imagine what could happen in a more developed country like Sweden or America. I really don't think we should underestimate what can happen when people get together and talk. It also shows that rape can be the result of skewed perspectives, and that's something you can change. But of course, just sex education on its own isn't going to solve everything. This is just one small step of many that need to be taken in order to eliminate sexual assault. Another step is more research. The little research that's been done thus far indicates that what creates a rapist is a combination of several different factors, like social inadequacy, various types of exclusion, low self-esteem, attachment issues, family dynamics and violence in the family, and lacking social competence. There needs to be more research done to reach more conclusive conclusions. Let's end this video with one of my favorite objections. Consent classes are the biggest feminist insult to a man's intelligence, especially to a Western man. Well, first of all, these classes should be held for both men and women. Only focusing on men as perpetrators wouldn't be very inclusive, since men can be raped as well, whether by women or by boyfriends, and women can be raped by women as well. Consent is a matter of person-to-person interaction, not gender. Second of all, who gives a fuck if you think it's an insult? Your feelings are not an argument. The feelings of offended men are not worth more than the security of women, for the same reason that the feelings of offended Muslims or Christians aren't worth more than freedom of speech. There are certain virtues we as a society need to uphold, and catering to the offended is not one of them.